And that sort of lesson is going to not only take you through this position, but other positions in the future. Hi friends, it's Priscilla here. I have some news for you all today. If you follow me on Instagram, you may already know this info, but recently I actually transitioned from a genetic counselor assistant position to a new role. So now I'm doing cancer clinical research. This won't change anything about the content on this channel. I still plan on making videos about genetic counseling and public health, so stay tuned for more videos about that and subscribe. So as someone who's been a genetic counselor assistant for 4 years at 2 different institutions, I just wanted to make this video for those of you who are starting a genetic counselor assistant position and hope this video will help you. So the first thing is be detailed, organized, and thorough in your role. So you may think you are a detail-oriented person, but when it comes to gene names, variant names, they all can be very similar to one another. You have gene names like MSH3 and MSH6, and so when you're inputting that sort of information into the system, you want to be accurate with that information. Additionally, if you are, sending a saliva kit to a patient's home, you want to make sure that it goes to the correct address. If it doesn't go to the correct address, then their neighbor might know that they're doing genetic testing, and it's a breach of confidentiality. So make sure that you double check your work, even if you do think that you're detail-oriented. So this is all to say, be sure to double check your work even if you think that everything looks right on the first glance. Additionally, you want to make sure that you are making sure that each patient is accounted for. You do not want any of the patients to be, left behind or forgotten about, especially if these patients are interested in doing genetic testing. Having someone who, is waiting for results and never gets the results back can be a very negative patient experience, and that might color the way that the patient looks at not only your clinic, but your organization as a whole, especially if you're part of a larger medical system. Another thing to consider is be curious about everything. So that means asking questions to the genetic counselors, to the medical secretaries, to everyone who you're working with. And the reason why you want to do that is, one, to show you are interested in being a competent genetic counselor assistant. This also shows that you are interested in learning. A lot of the genetic counselors love to mentor and teach their fellow GCAs or whoever is shadowing them. And so this will deepen not only your connections with your coworkers, but also your knowledge. You'll be more competent and knowledgeable about your responsibilities and your role much earlier in the process if you ask questions simply. Another thing to do is be thoughtful to patients and other healthcare providers. So for a lot of patients coming through the clinic, it's perhaps their first time in going through a genetic counseling process. They might be the only one in their family or those that they know about that has gone through the genetic counseling process. And so being there for the patient and letting them know, like, hey, this is what the genetic counseling process is going to look like, and being patient with them when they ask you questions is very helpful for the patient in acknowledging and answering their concerns about the process. Additionally, expect that people are going to get upset with you. That could be patients, that could be genetic counselors, that could be other healthcare providers. It's honestly just part of the job. You're working with people. People are not always going to be happy with you, even if you do a good job. And so, for example, you might have to let a patient know that they need to give in another sample because their first sample failed, or that their appointment needs to be rescheduled for scheduling issues or staffing issues, and patients might be upset and say, hey, this isn't my fault. Why do I have to do this? Or why do I have to reschedule my appointment? And so it's important for you to acknowledge their frustrations and their concerns about things that are going on. So it's important for you to acknowledge that this is a really frustrating time or scary experience that they're going through, and you want to do everything in your power to help them get through this time. Something that I want to address that might not have come up for you in your previous roles is how to address doctors. Anyone with an MD, PhD, or MD, PhD, start off with addressing them by doctor last name. unless they tell you directly, hey, call me by my first name. Even if that's the case and they tell you to call them by their first name, in front of the patient, always call them Dr. last, so that the patient is aware of who is their treating physician and who is their nurse and who is their genetic counselor, etc. And so being very respectful of their position is important in a role as a GCA. Another thing, try to leave work at home. And as someone who is just graduating college or might have had other positions before this, you might think, oh, this particular tip doesn't really apply to me. But what I will say is something that's very different about patient care versus other types of jobs, let's say like in a lab or something, you might feel a push to always be thinking about, okay, what is the next steps that are needed for this patient? What other things should I be doing right now? And so making those boundaries of trying to leave work at work instead of, checking your emails constantly on the weekends or at 8 p.m. on a Monday night. So there's always going to be work for you to do. Cases are always going to pop up. There's always going to be follow-up for patients. And so if you need to take that time off, take that time off. The clinic can run without you for a few days or even a few weeks. And so if you need that time, take that time. They hired you for a reason and for a long time. And so even if you do take off a few days or whatever, they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, we need to replace them, or, this is so inconvenient for us. Another thing that I want to talk about is being patient with yourself. So not just with patients, not with your other coworkers, but also with yourself. There are going to be times that you understand everything and can do things right the first time, and there's going to be instances where you have a lot of questions or don't really understand something or make a lot of mistakes, and that's completely normal regardless of what your role is. So to give an example, I was a genetic counselor in 2 different organizations. I thought that I knew quite a lot going into my second job. However, every clinic operates differently, and you need to have that humility and patience with yourself of taking the time to really learn all the procedures there are in this new job. And that sort of lesson is going to not only take you through this position, but other positions in the future. Related to this, always own up to your mistakes and let your supervisor or the genetic counselor know. So breaches in confidentiality, patients being upset, etc., do let your coworkers know about this, because they are serious violations, and it is helpful for the genetic counselor to know if something like this happens. Therefore, they can address it with the patient. They can know what they're walking into when it comes to a genetic counseling session or talking with the patient. Lastly, check in with yourself. So take the time every few months or so to reflect on, okay, what do I like about this job? What I don't like about this job? Likes and dislikes about this particular concentration or field of genetic counseling. These sort of reflections will help you decide later on, is this the sort of place, this sort of organization, or this sort of concentration that you want to work with in the future. So those are my main tips on becoming a successful genetic counselor assistant. Hit a thumbs up if you thought this video was helpful. If you have any other questions about this topic, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.